Good evening and welcome to yet another episode of Biz First in Focus. This evening I have a special guest. He is a scholar, a professor at the Oxford University. He is also the director of the Research Centre for Islamic Legislation and Ethics as well. He is Professor Tariq Ramadan. Thank you very much and welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Starting off, it's a pleasure to have you on board as well, Professor Ramadan. Starting off, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
What I do? I'm a teacher, in fact. I was born and raised in Switzerland, originally coming from Egypt. And what I'm trying to do, in fact, it's as a teacher to try to get a better understanding of the Islamic tradition, to remain faithful to the tradition, but also to be able to face the challenges of our time. So I'm advocating something which is essential for me is remaining faithful to the Islamic principles and to keep my mind open with my fellow Muslims to the world and the contemporary challenges. So it's quite a challenge in itself.
Have you been successful over the last few years in terms of what you are trying to do and promote Islam?
As to teaching and trying to spread around a renewed vision and understanding, I think things are moving, yes. I'm talking today about a silent revolution with the Muslim minds. I think that we are getting a better understanding, even though, of course, we have challenges when it comes to literalism, to violence, what is happening in Iraq or in Syria. These are challenges that we cannot deny, but we should not be misled by the marginal expressions of violence and extremism and forget the deep movement in history that is bringing a deeper understanding of Islam.
The silent revolution, the word revolution, isn't it a bit too harsh given the context of Islam?
No, because I really think that we have to take the word the way it is. It's the literal meaning of revolution is to change your understanding. So going from repeating what was said in the past to understanding the principles and the eternal principles while you are facing the contemporary challenges, this is an intellectual revolution, as well as I'm calling for radical reform in our understanding. And the radical reform, radical today is not a good word. Still, I think that on some issues we should radically change our understanding in order to be able to move on. So there are things that are positive in changing the movement, reassessing where we are, and trying to come with new vision and new answers.
Take a look at what has taken place in the world during the last few decades or so. We saw the 9/11 bombings. We saw the manner in which invasions have taken place in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. Given these contexts, do you think that the conduct of Muslims need to change somewhat to adjust to the contemporary world?
Now, I think that we have to look at the world the way it is and not to be in a state of denial by saying, oh, that's not us, this is not Islam, what happened in the state is not Islam, what is happening in Syria is not Islam. We can't do that. We need to come with a clear Islamic positions, on a clear Islamic position and a clear statements as killing innocent people, targeting civilians. This has nothing to do with our religion, and we should come with the verses and the prophetic traditions that are helping the people to understand the overall message of Islam.
However, people describe Islam in different forms. We see the manner in which Shias explain Islam, we see the manner in which the Sunnis explain Islam, and then we see several factions explaining Islam. I hear that there are over 60 factions of Muslims across the world. And given this context, you are saying that this is what needs to be promoted, this is what Islam is all about. But isn't that subjective?
That's a very good point, because when people are talking about Islam, we Muslims very often we are presenting ourselves as something which is a uniformity, and the people are confused because what is happening? All these people speaking in the name of Islam, who is right? At the end of the day, what we need to say is that there is one Islam as to our principles and our belief and our practice. The same if you are Shia and Sunni, if you are a reformist, a rationalist, a literalist, a mystic. it's the same Islam. Now we have different interpretations that are here, and we have also to acknowledge that there are different interpretations. The very important message that we need to translate is there is a diversity of interpretation and there is an accepted diversity in Islam. Now, we can't go as far as accepting that some people, in the name of their interpretation, are behaving against the very principle of Islam. So, for example, anyone who is coming to me and telling me, in the name of Islam, I can kill civilians or innocent people, or I can torture, I will say, I'm sorry, this is not in the accepted.
What is jihad then?
So the jihad here, that's also something which is important, because the Muslims very often, they don't know how to use the term, and some are misusing the term. Jihad has nothing to do with war. Jihad first has two dimensions. First is the way you resist what is bad. For example, between you and yourself, any human being trying to resist his or her temptations or
I want to interrupt you for a second here, Professor.
No, but
is there a jihad now in the world?
No, there is jihad everywhere. Now I experience right now a jihad. I wanted to talk and you prevent me from talking, so I have to master my tongue to listen to you. So this is a personal jihad. This is where I'm resisting my temptation to speak, listening to you and responding in a wise way. This is the personal jihad. This is everywhere. Every single human being trying to master her or his instincts or desire is going through jihad. Now, there is another dimension, which is when you look at the world today, there are injustices, there is poverty, there is illiteracy. Everything that you are going to do to resist poverty or discriminations or racism is a jihad against what is bad. And then what you have to do is to reform it for what is good. So, for example, in many societies, I'm talking about social jihad. For example, in Sri Lanka, with Buddhists, with Hindus, with Christians and Muslims, we need to have something which is a jihad against poverty, a jihad against illiteracy, a jihad against racism. This is jihad. Now, what they are doing in Syria with the so-called Islamic State or ISIS...
So that is acceptable, in your opinion?
What they are doing?
That's right.
No, what they are doing it has nothing to do with jihad. This is something which is completely unacceptable, and we have to condemn this. And I'm doing it, and we are so many. Almost the consensus among the scholars and the Muslims is to say what is happening in Syria has nothing to do with justice, has nothing to do. These people are instrumentalizing Islam. So this is what I was telling you. What we need to do is to clarify our terminology. You ask me about jihad, I told you this is jihad. Now what they are doing is to kill innocent people, is to torture, is to kill Muslims and people of other faiths. We say, no, that's not acceptable. And we, as Muslims, we have to stand up and to say, we cannot accept that. But we should not stop at the religious level. We also have to be involved in the political discussion, because it's not enough to condemn the consequences by saying this violent extremists who are calling or speaking in the name of Islam, we have to condemn them. We need to know the reasons. Why is it happening today? Why, for example, we were silent when the big powers around the world went in Iraq and destroyed the country? We need to go to the reasons and why did it happen.
How do you intend to fight these forces, if so? What is your...
First, there are different levels. So first is what I was saying is the religious discourse should be clear. Mm-hmm. This is the way we respond. Second, we need to go to the political reasons, meaning here, who are the governments and the powers who are involved in what is happening? When the world saw the United States of America, for example, lying about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and using this as a reason to invade Iraq and to divide the country, and this is what we have now, the Iraqi pattern. Look at what happened in what is happening in Syria, what happened in Libya, what is happening in Yemen now. Day in, day out, people are killed. You cannot just blame the extremists and not act upstream against the reasons. And the other thing that we have to do is also to ask our fellow citizens, don't be passive and look at this and only blame the governments and blame the extremists. We have to say something. We also have to be involved in the discussion by saying, in the name of our citizenship, we are asking our governments, be it here or anywhere in Europe, not to support dictators.
What you're trying to say, Professor, seems like a dream. It does not have any practical sense for all Muslims to get together, for all Muslims to unite and have one particular cause in their mind, and let's do this. That seems very unpractical. People can preach, but how practical is it?
But it's not going to happen because it's completely unrealistic to think that we will have one.
That's what you just said now.
No, this is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have to be clear on some of our discourse and understanding. So it's not to have only one cause.
What is the understanding?
The understanding of Islam and the understanding of the principles and the understanding of the challenges. So I'm not saying we have to have a unity based on uniformity. It's not going to happen. I started by saying there is an accepted diversity. Now what we have to do when it comes to the challenges or the controversies that you are talking about is to have a clear discourse and not only to be on the defensive. I don't want only to spend my time saying it's not Islamic, it's not Islam. No, I want also to challenge the great powers and some of the government by saying, I'm sorry, you cannot blame or condemn extremism at the far end of the process and not come to your responsibility when you are also ignoring people's supporting dictators. So it's much more complex than that.
Do you think powerful nations like Saudi Arabia, the Muslim powerhouses in the region like the Gulf countries, are turning a blind eye towards what's happening in other countries which have been affected with war?
Not a blind eye. I would say they are just supporting their interest and they don't care about the people. So what is happening with the Gulf states is today something that is not acceptable in any ethical
What must
standard.
they do if that's the case?
First, when you are so rich, you don't put your money only in Western banks. You look at poverty in the South. What we need today, from Sri Lanka going to the Gulf states and going to African country is South-South collaboration. Why is it that we are taking the money, we put this in the West, we are supported by the West, and then even in the refugee crisis that we have now, where are the Muslim majority countries? We have only two that are involved. Yes, it's true that we have Turkey, we have Jordan. Where are the other countries? Why is it that we are blaming the world not to welcome the refugees? Where are the Muslim majority countries? So there is something that we need to stop here, which is to stop the victim mentality, to come with a better understanding. And as you are asking me to speak about the Gulf state, of course there is something which is missing, which is when you have so much money, when you have gas and oil and all this, what are you doing with this money? Is this money your personal or your family belonging, or is it something that you have to share with humanity and your brothers and sisters in humanity, and among them there are Muslims that need support? I think that this is the critical discussion that we need to have here, but I wouldn't go only on this discussion by saying, because the way you ask the question is putting me in a way where we are on the defensive, we are critical. I think that we have both sides. We have to be assertive with some of our principles by saying, look, as Muslims today, in the world, in the global world, Islam and Muslims should be an added value in terms of ethical concerns and address. For example,
you spoke about principles. Won't this isolate the Muslim community across the world?
Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. If as Muslims and as human beings, we acknowledge first that there is a humanity that is one. Ya ayyuhan nas, this is what we find in the Quran. O you people. You people means all humanity. First. Second, every single human being, women or men, has a dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We give dignity to human being. And there is an equality here. We start with the first principle. And more than that, we say, let us now be clear. Justice is for Muslims and people of other faiths. Discrimination is unacceptable. To the point that I can say here that anti-Semitism as racism is completely unacceptable, even though I, as a human being, I'm against the Israeli policy towards the Palestinians. But I will never confuse being against a government and being against Jews. Being against Jews is anti-Islamic. But criticizing all the governments, and among them the Gulf states as Israel and others, this is the only way we have to come. And by speaking like this, anyone who is watching us now, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Hindu, an atheist, an agnostic, can agree with this. They can find universal principles. So principles is bringing us together and not dividing us.
Religion, all religions preach equality, Professor. Do you agree or disagree?
No, not all the religions, no, because or spiritualities, this would be the ideal discourse. But the problem is when you...
But do you agree majority of the religions preach equality?
It should be, but the problem is not religions. The problem is who is interpreting religion. We have in the Islamic tradition people who are like this. They are interpreting religion as equality and justice. But you have some interpretations that are putting some people, even, some think that Arabs are beyond the others. So it's not in the book, it's not in the Quran, but it's in the interpretations. Even when you look at other interpretation, in Buddhism, for example, you have some interpretations that are disputable. In Hinduism, you have some interpretations that are, and the mixture between religion and culture. What we are talking about when we speak about castes, for example, this hierarchy that we have between castes is not an egalitarian discourse, and we have to be critical in the name of the principle of equality and the ideal of equality. We have to criticize any discourse, any interpretation that is promoting injustice and inequality.
Why isn't there global peace? What is the reason behind this? We see conflicts across the world. What is the reason behind this?
Why the people are fighting?
Why are they fighting?
Because of power, because of money, because of interests.
Is it because of religions that they're fighting?
It could be, of course. It could be. And this is when religion is used as an instrument of power. When you are instrumentalizing religion to get power, so this is exactly what is happening. So this is why to make our religions instruments of peace, you have to put the principles at the center and to challenge anyone who is behaving or acting and promoting power for him or herself, interest for the countries or geostrategic interests, and making us think that it's enough to have a seemingly democratic process when it comes to politics, and behind the scene we have an undemocratic way of dealing with economy. Because the problem that we have today is that it's nice to speak about democracy in political terms, but who are the people who have the money? Who is deciding upon the politicians? Are the people, the transnational corporation? And in that field there is no democracy, there is no equality. So we have to stop being naive and to think about the global picture much more than having a discourse about, peace and love, while
there was an ethnic conflict
somewhere else.
There was an ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka in the year 2009, until the year 2009, and now it has ended. It's been nearly 6 years following the end of the conflict. What must the people do in order to build reconciliation, in order to build accountability, in order to move forward under these circumstances and ensure that the wounds of the conflict are healed?
That's a very important question, because it's a process of reconciliation. And if you want to reconcile the people, you have to listen to them. Their concerns, why they were fighting for, and also their perceptions. So when you feel that you are discriminated, when you feel that there is no space for you in the society, when you feel that there are people or citizens that feel that they have the right, or at least the real citizenship, and others don't, you have to struggle. So what should change in Sri Lanka is the narrative. This country is not the country of the Buddhist or the Hinduist or the Muslims or the Christians. It's the country for all the people. So in the name of common citizenship, Buddhist, Hindus, Christian, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, Tamil, all the people who are here should come together and build a narrative that is acknowledging the wounds of the people, but also their hope. And the most important thing for reconciliation is not to stick to what happened in the past, not to stick to where we come from, but where we are heading together, is to change the mindset. You know how we can call this? An intellectual revolution. Change the way you look at things. And
but isn't closure important for the victims' families, Professor?
It is, but once again, there is something which is important, to talk about it, to listen to it, but also to teach forgiveness and compassion. That's also something which is very important. You should not, in the name of what happened in the past, just stick to, I want justice, whatever. No, we have to come to something which is also acknowledging the fact that, yes, people were killed, yes, there are wounds, but at one point you have to go beyond this. You need to call for justice, but you also need to learn to forgive.
Will everyone forgive and forge ahead? Is it practical? Is it the way forward? Can we do it?
Of course we can do it, and it was done in many countries. Look at what happened in South Africa. Look at what happened in Rwanda. And it was much more than what you experience here. It was huge, and some people came. Even in Palestine, some of the people are looking at what was done to their kids and say, okay, I'm ready to forgive. So the way forward is justice and forgiveness. And by the way, for all the Muslims, that's exactly what is coming in the Quran. Inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adl wal ihsan. God commands justice and excellence. Excellence is, okay, you might have been wronged. You might have been discriminated, and even some of your family killed. But at one point, you have to go beyond this to try to come with justice and forgiveness and try to build for the future. And the future in Sri Lanka, it's about this. It's about what we need now is citizens in this country coming together and being able to say, okay, we know what happened, but now we know what we want. We want to be together, because this nation and the narrative and the memory and the history of Sri Lanka is with all of us. The we, which is building Sri Lankan identity, which are multiple identity.
Professor, you are known to have been in the list of the top 100 most influential people back in the year 2004, and also among the top 100 global thinkers. How far can you, and individuals like you, influence another?
I think that's a question which is difficult and at the same time simple. The fact that I'm here with you, you invited me because you heard about what I am doing. And I spent my time at the grassroots level teaching and dealing with people. And, you know, when I come here in Sri Lanka, this is my first visit, and you see what is the reaction of the audience, Muslims and people of other faiths. You see, at one point, you realize that you are doing something that could be influential. So if all the studies that I did and everything that I got as a knowledge, I can spread this, distribute it, share it with people, and help the people to become subjects of their history and to be committed, that's the way. So this is the impact. So with all humility, I'm trying my best, and with all humility, I hope that anyone who is listening to us now, if there is only one, with hearing this, could change and rethink his passivity to become a committed human being, this program would have been a good one.
Professor, your wife must be watching this program as well. In one of your quotes, you have said, behind every man is not a woman. She is beside him. She is with him, not behind him.
Yes,
do you accept? You made this quote?
Not only I accept, but I'm very happy that you are repeating it.
How well does Islam support this view?
But it's very important. You know, after the first revelation, the Prophet, peace be upon him, went back to his wife. And he was lost. And said, cover me, cover me. And she came to him, and she was not behind him. And she said, you are a good person. You are doing good. You are respecting people. And she, all his life, during 15 years, she was with him, not behind him, but she was with him. And I think that there is something which is very important for anybody, a husband, a wife. What is important is not who is at the front or who is leading. We have to lead together a family, a couple, and being parents together. You know what is the problem of Muslims today? Is not women. Is the absent father. Is the men that are not now doing the job. So we better come together, and together we understand it's not behind a great man. It's with the great man, a great woman, and this makes a great family. that there is no other way. And I would like the men to listen to me. Anyone who is listening to us, who is indulging in violence and domestic violence, should know that this has nothing to do with our religion. In this country it's happening, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, who is our model, never did it. So you better stop and look at your wife and know that she is beside you and not behind you. Never.
The conduct of the ISIS, how badly has this affected the Muslims across the world?
Badly, because at the end it's all about violence, and it nurtured this understanding that when you speak about Islam, you speak about violence. For example, a survey in France was showing that 75% of the French people are linking Islam with violence. So it has an impact. So we need to be quite clear about this, that it cannot be a narrative, it cannot be an understanding that we have to accept. Now, as I told you, we should avoid being apologetic, we should avoid being on the defensive, we should condemn and now find solutions and also speak about our shared responsibility.
Do you think that the West is taking the right approach in terms of combating terrorism across the world?
No, I think it's not the right approach, and sometimes I wonder if they are not nurturing it, and it could help some of their interest. If you look at what happened in North Mali, if you look at what happened in Afghanistan, look at the American policy in Afghanistan. It's exactly the opposite of people who tried to avoid violence. They were nurturing it. Look at the American policy in Iraq. If you were to promote violence, you would do exactly what they did. So no, it's not. And by talking to us, Western Muslims, by saying, you know what, we want moderate Muslims, and the way they are looking at moderate Muslims are Muslims that are not practicing Islam, sometimes that they are very far from the roots of Islam. You know why they are doing this? Because they don't trust Muslims. The problem is, if you want to act and to have a policy against violence, you better trust the Muslims. Not the Muslims you want, but the Muslims who are rooted in their tradition, who are able to be heard and listened to by all the Muslims around the world.
Professor, my final question to you. You said mistakes were committed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and even Libya. How can the world unite to avert another major crisis in terms of Syria?
No, I think I'm more cynical than that. I'm not hoping at that level, because 4 years ago I said clearly the Americans and the Europeans agreed with the Russian and the Chinese not to agree. So they agreed not to agree and to let it be as it is, to destabilize the whole Middle East. So I would say we should stop dreaming about unity, because it's not going to happen. It's all about economic interest and geostrategic interest. My hope is for us, for common, average citizens and intellectuals and journalists, to have a better understanding of the complexity and to come together. I much more value the power of counterpower, which means to be resisting these trends by having a critical thinking about what is happening, not to be politically naive, but to be involved in this and to understand whatever is your religion, whatever is your spirituality, our principles should be the same, our goals should be the same. So let us come together and try to work on that side. And it should be on all the fields. You were talking about ISIS. I would have liked to talk about the environment. I would have liked to talk about the global warming. I want to talk about consumerism, because this is what is happening. One of the major problems that you have here in Sri Lanka is what you eat. You eat much more things that are coming from transnational corporations than food that is coming from Sri Lanka. You are also colonized, culturally speaking. So freedom starts with what you eat, what you drink, and the way you thought.
The Muslims believe...
The way you think, sorry.
And the Muslims believe... Professor, just a follow-up question to my final question. Muslims believe it's the end of the world anytime soon. The Holy Quran also preaches so and so forth as to the developments that will take before the end of the world. Are we really nearing the end of the world?
No, we don't know, because, one day in the sight of God is 1,000 years in the reality of human being. And I think that we have to stop this discourse. What is coming out of this is superstition. The problem that we have with Muslims now, they are emotionally driven and very superstitious. So we better take our responsibility. The world is here. Don't ask when is the end. Know what you have to do with it now. So your responsibility first Instead, because you know what is behind your question, there is something which is very vicious in what we have, is the victim mentality. The Muslims say, oh, we are the victims, so the end of the world is coming, we are helpless, we don't know what to do. That's exactly the opposite of the right Islamic understanding. Stand for what is right, do your best to change the world. To the point, look at this, to the point that the Prophet ﷺ said, if the last day comes and you have in your hand a plant, just put it on earth. If it comes, even meaning what? You don't care about the last day. You have to care about what you can do now to show that you are reforming the world for the better. So this is the deep understanding. Stop superstition, start being realistic, and do what you have to do step by step, as much as you can. And with your intention, God will see what you wanted and what you have done.
Stop being emotional, stop being superstitious, be responsible and realistic. Professor Tariq Ramadan, thank you very much for joining us right on Biz First TV. It's a pleasure to have you on board today.